Okay, now we're going to look at how to write a screenplay and hopefully give you some tips and some information that's probably new to you. Here's some basic tips. First of all, you need to remember that a movie is visual. It's mostly about what you see. And secondly, it's about what you hear. But the visual and what is seen by the eye is more important and is dominant. You need to visualize your story. Imagine it happening before your eyes. Imagine watching it on TV. Imagine how it would unfold. So try and see how it looks, the pictures of it. If you can do that, it's going to help you. A screenplay is told in scenes. A scene changes, or you start a new scene when you move to a different time passes, or you move to a different place. So it's a change of venue or a change of time. Those two things determine when you go into your next scene. And remember not to waste time. You don't want to get your audience bored or let them lose interest in the story, so you move quickly through your story. Every single scene must have a point. It must have a reason to be there. If it doesn't have a purpose, ditch that scene. A story will unfold through events, not thoughts, not ideas. Specific things need to happen. It is events that link your story together and that moves it forward. Time and space in a screenplay are elastic. You can stretch time, you can jump back in time, you can change space, you can go from one place to another place immediately. So you can jump between, you can even kind of show what's happening in two different places at the same time. You can be very elastic and do whatever you like, really, with space and time. So those are some of the things that make a movie a bit different to writing a book or a short story or something like that. Now we're going to look at story structure. The basic structure of a story is really quite simple. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have a specific point at the end of the beginning that moves you into the middle section, and we call that plot point 1. Something specific happens that moves the story into the next part of the structure, moves it into the middle part, and then at the end of that middle section, another specific thing needs to happen that moves the story into the end. So 2 key events will separate that beginning, middle, and end. We also call it a turning point. So plot point 1, at the end of the first part of the film, something will happen. It's a turning point, and it forces your main character into a certain course of action. So maybe they were quite merrily going along with their lives. They didn't need to make any choices or do anything specific, but now something has happened that forces them to act or to take a specific course. Then the middle of the story, that course will unfold, what happens as a result of their actions, the various challenges. We have increasing challenges that they need to face. Things get more and more difficult, and then another major thing happens. We also call it the Act 2 climax, where they are forced to now risk everything, make a final last-ditch attempt to achieve whatever that is that they're after. So that is plot point 2, or the Act 2 climax, and that event forces or moves the story into the final part of your story, the end phase. And in the end, we need to have some resolution. All the loose ends need to be tied up. The story basically comes to closure, and you want your audience to feel satisfied, or whatever it is that you want them to feel at the end of the story. That emotion is going to be settled in the end part of the story. To give you an idea, if you're writing a 5-page screenplay, which is what you're after, the beginning will be on pages 1 and into page 2. Maybe in the middle of page 2, you want your plot point 1, your turning point, to happen around there. And then the middle will run from the rest of page 2, page 3, and 4. And at the end of page 4, you would have your Act 2 climax, that plot point 2, that second big thing that happens. And then page 5 would be for the end, the resolution, tying up the loose ends, when we show what your character, what happens to the character right at the end and how their life is going to move on from there. In the beginning, so the first page and a half of your story, you want to introduce your main character and any other important characters. You want your audience to meet them and to learn the most essential, important things about them and the story. What does the audience need to know about these people and the context before the story can actually move forward? So you need to communicate those things, either in the setting, the words that are said, the things that happen to the character right at the beginning will all tell us who they are at the start of the story. You need to introduce your characters, your context, and what the story is about. So many screenplays would have just one line that gives us a key to what the story is actually about. Just a few words that in that nutshell actually is a little hint. Your audience probably won't even really notice it, but you know that it's there, and it's clever storytelling. It just drops that little hint. This is where we're going. This is what the story is actually about. So think about a line that someone could say that would indicate the core theme or message or point of the story. What you need to do at the beginning of the story is answer some questions for the audience. The answers to these questions must come through in the dialogue or the context and the scenes that you're showing. What is the story about? Who is the main character? Do I like the main character? What does the main character want? What drives him or her? What is stopping him or her from getting it? What are their challenges and obstacles? Do I want to carry on watching the film? You want to get your audience interested and engaged with your main character. They might dislike the character. They must feel something towards the character and have some reason, some interest, some hook that makes them want to carry on watching this film and see what's going to happen to the character as the story progresses. Then plot point 1, it's at the end of Act 1, at the end of the beginning. Something significant happens, like I've said. It forces the main character to act or react. It moves the story on into the next phase, into Act 2. Okay, so you really need to think of a significant event. It could be a letter that is received, or an accident that happens, or something that forces the character to move forward and make choices. In the middle, or Act 2, you need to think about the following things. How does the main character change? Do we see them grow? Do they change as a person? Why do they change? What triggers the change or causes the change in them? And how are you going to show this growth? Stories need to show change and growth in the characters, particularly the main character in a short story. We want to see that they are growing as a person, they're learning more about life, and they're being transformed through what is happening to them. So how are you going to show that visually? How's the audience going to see and have evidence that the character is changing? What happens because of the change? And how does the new, more mature character handle things differently perhaps, and what's the impact of the change on their environment, on the people around them? Remember, if in the end your hero simply gets what they wanted in the beginning, then they haven't really changed. Often they need to realize that what they thought was important is not what's important. They want something else, or they discover something else matters more. But often them just going after something different or valuing something different can signify a change in the character. Okay, then at the end of Act 2, or the middle, you have plot point 2, or the Act 2 climax. It's another significant happening, a moment that raises the stakes. It means things now get really serious. There's no more faffing around. The character might have been half-hearted, committed to what they wanted, thought, I think I want this, but now it's all or nothing. If they don't follow through, they're going to die, or someone's going to be hurt, or they're going to lose their family, or something serious is going to happen. And it pushes them to make a final massive choice where they risk everything. And this is what moves the story into Act 3, or the end of the story, because we see whether the character, by that choice and that action that they take, what happens then? Because that was the final stake. That was it. That was the final moment. So now, have they won or have they lost? And what is the outcome? So the end, during that climax, the Act 2 climax, the story has reached an absolute crisis point. The stakes are high. They can't be any higher. and you build on the final tension, and then you resolve it. That end part of the story, you need to just kind of just bring it down a little bit. You don't leave your audience hanging. You want them to feel, whew, we've landed. Okay, we've got an answer. We've got the end. So you want to also tie up any loose ends, and you want to show evidence that your character has actually changed. This story that you're telling in your movie is so significant that a person has actually changed, developed, grown through it. If it hasn't made an impact on your character's life, then it's not going to make an impact on anyone's life. Okay, and because of their final action, we see if the character wins or loses and how they are transformed. Remember, when you're thinking about endings for your story, there are many possible endings, and the first one you think of might not be the best option. Sometimes, it might be completely different, and you really need to think about all the different ways the story could end and play it out in your mind and imagine what the impact would be on your audience, which ending's actually going to really pack the punch and make your story work. It's probably the biggest challenge, and many short films that we get, or the screenplays we get, fall short on the ending. It's just completely weak, and it's like, what's the point of that story? So to overcome that, just think of all the different options and things that could happen in the end, play them each out in your mind, and decide which one is actually going to be best for your story. It might not be the one you first wanted. Think about how your audience should feel about the hero. How do you want your audience to feel about your main character? And does the ending that you choose give your audience that feeling? Does the ending surprise you? If you were watching it, would it take you by surprise? Does it make sense as well? I mean, can it be justified? And will it surprise the audience? It's quite nice to have a surprising ending, so you don't feel like you just predicted, you knew exactly what was going to happen and that happened. That's just boring. It's nice if there's something really clever that comes up the end and you go, aha, now I like that. And what is the lasting impression that you want to leave? Is there a message? Message movies can be very corny, and we don't really want to be preachy or anything through the films, but it's really nice to make a film that can make an impact. So be careful about the message that you leave. Can you make an impact and leave a message without being corny and preachy about it? Can you just make it a powerful ending that makes people think, go away and think again and again about your film and come back to your story constantly? I think those are the best, the ones that stay in your mind because you're keeping thinking about the characters and their choices. Remember that your hero doesn't have to win. Okay. Typing up your screenplay. We would like you to please put your screenplay into the proper format. Now, this is probably new to you, and that's okay. It doesn't matter if you make some mistakes, but if you at least try, we would appreciate that. It helps us follow. There's a reason you have screenplay format, and it helps you visualize the story and understand what the writer's trying to get across. We've got some examples of script layout in the documents that we have, and you just need to look at that. It'll give you a good idea. If you're using a computer, which hopefully you are, use a Courier font, size 12, and leave line gaps and spacing as shown. I'm not going to discuss it here. You need to see it on the page, and I think after this we'll show you a few snippets on the screen. So leave the spacing as we show you. 1 page of screenplay is equivalent to 1 minute of screen time. Remember that you must put every important bit of information must be written into your screenplay. Anything that's important, if it's important there's a coffee cup, or important that there's a cliff face, you can't do that at school. But whatever you need, that the audience needs to see, you need to specify. It needs to be written in the description of your screenplay. Exactly what's in the room that is important. If it's not important, then it doesn't matter. But if you don't write it in the screenplay, then we probably won't have it there on the day of filming. No one would have thought of it, and it'll get lost, and then your story is going to lose points or just not do very well. You must write in the details of what is seen and heard. any sound effects or obviously any dialogue, the words that are spoken, and the specific words that are spoken. You can't say, so-and-so just spoke about his grandmother's death. That just isn't going to help us at all. You have to say the exact words that that person is going to say. That's the only way we can get a good idea of the flow of the conversation and if there's too much information or too little information. So all the details of what's seen and heard must be written on the page. If it's not written in the screenplay, it's not going to end up in the film. And of course, while we're reading your screenplay, it might be all we have from you about your story. So we've got to choose the films we want to make based on the information you give us. That's all we have. So make sure you put all the information that is needed in there. Now, go for it. I encourage you to just give it a bash. And good luck. And we're looking forward to getting your screenplay entry. Ciao.